So now what we need to do is start setting up corrective shapes for the jawbone, and then we're going to look at how to actually get them implemented and driven by a UI setup. So first off, we're going to have to start creating the morph shapes, and we need a copy of our character as it currently stands. Best way to do that, I'd turn off skin while you copy it off. It tends to make it a bit easier. Looks like we're going to have to unlock an axis for the character, and we're just going to copy it straight up. And the reason I unlocked the skin modifiers, if I didn't, the character would pop back to its original skinned position. Doesn't really matter, you could easily just delete the skin, but you'll see that this just makes a bit more sense, I guess. I'm just going to call this default, and this will be the shape that I start all the other shapes from, so I can just sort of have a setup. I don't have to keep going through this same process. I just need to get rid of now both of the modifiers off the stack. So this is our default character they're going to be working with. We're going to want this to be an editable poly so that we can do edge loops and rings and use all the poly tools to get it to work correctly. And we're also going to want to just hide off all the polygons that we don't want to see, because we're using full body morphs, but we really don't need to see the rest of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the sub-object level and just grab all the polygons in the character that I'm really not going to need to see. That might be pretty good there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say hide selected, and I can just clean that up a bit again, I guess, if I'm going to be really picky. Hide selected, so we're not seeing a whole bunch of extra targets that we don't, or vertices when we're building the targets that we don't need. And hide selected, so that we've just got the head left of the character. Now, okay, so the next thing we're going to need is an actual morph modifier on the skinned character, and that should go below skin always. You always want morpher below skin, and the simple reason for that is skin is deforming vertices and moving the vertices of the model to the new location. It's not actually pulling the object, it's pulling all its vertices. If morpher were above skin, and we'd pose the character, and then we turned up a morph target, the character would actually morph back to its original place. It would actually, pull the character all back to its standard pose, and that's not what you want. Other thing about morphing you need to know is that it is best to make sure that all of your envelopes have been baked down to the vertex level. Now, we did that with this character. We've been using paint weighting, and we baked all the weights of the skin modifier. And that's just a common practice that I do. But if you've managed to weight your character with the skin modifier and only use the envelopes, you still need to bake it if you're going to be doing any morphing on the character. Because what will happen is you will actually morph a shape, let's say, right out of an envelope, and all of a sudden the vertices will skip outside of the envelope and smear back to 0, 0, 0, wherever they started from, wherever their initial position was. So you need to make sure you bake all that. Couple other things with morphing that need to be addressed right off the bat is morph targets have to have exactly the same amount of vertices or they won't be valid. And we've done that. We've made a copy of the object here to start our targets with. Now, one of the things we can't do here is change the vertex count, so we simply cannot go in and add in a new cut because we don't have enough to start with. You have to make sure you have enough to begin with. The next thing you have to also make sure is that the vertice count is also in the same order. Essentially what happens is vertex 1 of the model will get morphed to vertex 1 in the morph modifier. So if you mirror the character from side to side or tried to rebuild it and just managed to add exactly the same amount of vertices to it, it wouldn't be a valid shape because vertex 1 in the morpher might be here and vertex 1 in the original might be here, and you basically blow your model up. You'd end up with a gigantic mess on your hands as your morph channel was turned up. With that said, what we're going to do is we're going to begin building a couple of corrective shapes for that jawbone. First off, the one we're going to need is when the jawbone opens. So if we go in and we select the jawbone and just show in a rotate mode, rotate down, the teeth are coming out of the top of the lip. And from side to side, we're also going to need some. You can see that the teeth are pushing through the side. So what we're going to really need is 3 corrective shapes so that we can blend them all together and have them all working together, so that when we rotate the jaw around, the mesh is already correcting itself for running into the teeth and trying to stop that collision. In doing that, we'll get much more range of motion. Right now we have very little range of motion before it starts to crash into it. And what we'll be able to get is the sort of faking the upper lip sliding over the teeth on the inside and the jawbone and everything. To start that process, we're going to start by copying our default shape over and over and over again, so that we've got targets that we can work with. This one is going to be called correct jaw open, so we know what its purpose is. And from here, what we're going to do is we're going to go in and add this object immediately to the morpher. So pick from scene, add it to the morpher. What I'm going to do is I'm going to dial it up to 100. I want to turn on automatically reload targets. What this does is allows me to be able to model this target and watch what the results are on the final character. I'm just also going to hide off all the rig that I don't need to see right now. Oops. And yeah, and the control object. Oh, I'll leave the control objects on because I think I'm going to change a bit of that. I'm going to remove the head tilt back from the animation. So now we just have a jaw open. And what we can do now is we can go into the target shape and we can go about setting up a corrective shape. So I'm going to use soft selections, which are just about the best thing going in Max for creating morph targets. I want to turn up the soft selection with the vertex picked in the middle of the upper lip, and you can see I'm getting a more and more of an area here. I'm going to change to view for the and you can see when I pull on the shape, you can see it updates automatically on the morphing on the original, because we have automatic updates on. Now, one of the problems with the soft select, it's pulling on the bottom lip, so it's best to use the edge distance. And what the edge distance will do, I'll turn it about 5 or 6, somewhere around there. What it does is it actually traces the edge distance for the soft select, and now when I pull on the upper lip, you can see the lower lip isn't moving, so we don't have that problem that we didn't want. And what I might want is a couple of these vertices where it's crashing the most. And I'm going to start trying to correct some of this and make it look like it is actually sliding over that surface. So corrective shape. Might look something like that. It helps actually fix the jaw, so when it opens, we're going to actually drive 2 things with our control object. We're going to drive this morph target up, and we're going to drive the jawbone down. Now what we can do is we can try and do a few more fixes here. It looks like we're not getting a really nice curve in the lips anymore. So that's a matter of going in and trying to adjust our shape so that we actually get the look that we're going for. And it's just a matter of playing around now. And this is part of the problem with using this system in production, is that it takes time to work with it and make it work nicely and make it work together, as opposed to doing a complete targeted targeted system that is absolute targets, where you just create the face you want and that's it. You don't have to worry about trying to play with it and getting things to work and work together. You just simply set it up as you want it. However, this system is going to have a lot more flexibility to it. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to work on one side of the face here and just try and get it looking the way that I want. It's looking quite nice. And what I have is a mirror morph script that we're going to use to actually make this a symmetrical morph now that we've corrected one side and we've worked on it. Maybe we could work on it a bit more. And I'm going to show you how to use that tool as well. And I believe there's others available, as well as paid plugins as well that will do mirror morph targets. But this one works quite well. I've written it just specifically for this DVD series. The mirror morph script is something I just wrote up for this, and it's just called mirror verts test. And what it basically does, it gives you a couple of functions for setting up mirrors. The first function is get mirror data, and it has a threshold that you can input into it. Essentially, the lower the threshold, the more accurate it's going to be, because what it's doing is it's essentially going and looking at a selection of vertices of the original, and it's finding the right and left sides to the character, which one goes with which. Now, if your character's perfectly symmetrical, the default threshold should work. If it's not, if it's off, if it's been adjusted, you may have to increase this threshold. This script really isn't meant to deal with characters that are not symmetrical. For all intents and purposes, it would start to fall apart. It's pretty simple. It also has very little error checking, so you have to use it exactly the way I sort of suggest you to use it. One of them being is it works specifically on poly objects at the base level, not meshes. So we have to make sure we have a poly object. The second function is the mirror morph, and the one parameter it takes is symmetry, true or false. And with false, what it'll do is it'll mirror the target, like a true mirror of the target. So the left side to the right side to the left. If we say symmetry true, what it'll do is it'll mirror the right to the left. And it's specifically all it does is right to left. It doesn't do the other way around. So you have to work on the right side of the face, the character's right side of the face, for that to work. It happens to be the way I work. You can change that around by swapping some of the code around in here, which array is working with which. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to evaluate the script just by saying evaluate all. And if we take a look at the MaxScript listener, it should, when we do that, it should actually give us get mirror data and mirror morph. Now, like I said, if I were to pick, we have to start with the original head, and in this case it's this one, and you're going to see that it's going to crash right away, the script. It's an editable mesh, and if I say mirror get mirror data, put my mouse on that line and say shift enter, and immediately it's going to throw an error because this isn't a base level of a poly. The other thing you have to make sure is that you're at frame 0 and the head isn't morphed or being pulled by skin or anything, so you might actually want to just turn off morpher and skin and make sure that there's nothing changed about the model. So I'm also going to go to change the base model. I'm just going to say poly select right above the edit mesh and then say collapse 2. And now when we run this, it'll take a second, but what it'll do is it'll go and find mirror vertices. Now, to speed it up a bit, and I've already got this happening, is that there's a selection of vertices selected. If there are no vertices selected, you'll see that the get mirror data will find nothing. So this is basically representing the right side, the left side, and the center line vertices. So it's designed to work on a selection of vertices. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and pick a selection of vertices, and it doesn't matter whether you get them the exact same ones on the right or left side. Just make sure you get them around the area that you're going to need for the most part. You can limit the which ones you are picking up as much as you want, just to help speed it up a bit more. The more it has to think about, the slower it'll be in mirroring the target. And so now I'm going to say get mirror data, and you can see that it's found 819 on the right. It went and found 819 matches on the left, essentially, and it matched it up. If it doesn't find a match, it'll still actually show this to you at this current time. Just that it'll not try and mirror over to it. It'll just assign an undefined to the array. And then there's 84 vertices that are on the center line that essentially it's not going to deal with unless we do the mirror morph with symmetry equaling true. And that's what we want for our first step here. So I'm just going to get out of subobject over to our target. And our target is no longer symmetrical. We pulled some vertices on this side, and we need to make them push them over this side. So what I'm going to say is symmetry true, and give it a second while it thinks about it. And you can see that it popped it this side to be the same as the other side. It didn't mirror right to left in this case because we said symmetry. If you pull the center line right or left, side to side at all, it will correct that and put it back on the center of the character. But it will leave it any movement forward or back or up and down. It'll basically make sure that it's always on the X axis and correctly aligned. There's, like I said, this script doesn't take everything into account, and could cause you some problems if you don't work very cleanly and very neatly like I do with characters, making sure that you've got symmetrical characters using the symmetry modifier to start with, and you know, don't change it drastically from one side to the other. Okay, so now that we've got that mirrored side, if we go back to our jaw open, and I'll just put it there and turn on the skin, you can see now that it's not crashing into the teeth at all. And that's exactly what we want. We want to be able to open the mouth and have it look like it's pulling down over top of the teeth and sliding over the teeth. So what we're going to want to do in the next chapters is we want to be able to set this up with a control object so that when we move the control object up and down, the jaw will open and close, and our morph target will be driven at the same time at the same rate so that it will stop that top lip from sliding down into the teeth. But we'll still get a nice arc out of the lower lip, and we'll start still getting that nice pull with the jaw. We're also going to have to correct a couple other movements, and that's if we go into the, I'm just going to go to the morpher and I'll just turn off the jaw open correction, and we're going to need the bones back on the screen, and into rotation and into local. And one of the controls as well, when you move the control side to side, it's going to roll the jaw side to side as well. So we're also going to need a correction for side to side as well, so that the cheek, when it pushes to the right side of the character, the cheek on the left side actually stays out. So we're going to need two more corrective shapes just to get the jawbone to work nicely and to make it look like it's flexing nicely. This whole thing could be done with morph targets. Again, I tend to avoid it because the jaw, you want to be able to have that nice pivot point where the jaw should be pivoting. You should also, it's also nice to have a rotation on the jaw as it opens down. So this helps, facilitate that a bit better than a morph target does, or even using compound morph targets where you've got several morph targets driving the one shape, so that you can try and get an arc out of it. Now what we'll do is we'll animate the jaw moving right and left, and I'm just going to go and reset this at this point. Move along to frame 30, turn animate on, and let's move the jaw. Let's first go to the left. So we'll correct the right side of the face. And then we can just make sure that we've done it correctly and it all works on the other side of the face. I'm just using my angle snap to make sure I get it the same on both sides. So now we have just an animation of the jaw swinging side to side and open. So let's scrub along to frame 30 now. Turn off our animate, go into Morpher, make sure that our jaw correction for up and down is set to 0. I'm going to take the jaw up down correction and just slide it up out of the way for now. I guess I'll just hide these off. And I'm going to use my default head that's all set up, and I'm going to use that as the basis for the next one. And let's call this correct jaw left. And we'll make a copy of that. And we can go ahead and actually add this to the morpher. And again, it's kind of easiest if you turn it up to 100. It'll slow things down a bit, and it isn't always the best thing to have the always update on if it's a really big mesh, and it's certainly slowing the process down working with this character while I'm doing the capture, and it's even then just the UI is going very slow because of the capture software that's running. So again, I'm going to use the soft select with an edge distance turned on. I tend to set it around a 5 or a 6, and then what we can do is we can play with the fall off value to get what we're looking for. And we can correct the jaw area. Now what we want to do is we want to find and play with just the right amount of correction or fall off so that we don't get too much. We're falling off right into the nose right now, so I'll pull that down a fair bit more. And then we can try and correct this, maybe even pull it out because it would be sliding around the front of the teeth. So it's a lot of just sort of playing around and getting it right. And like I said, it's actually almost kind of hard to do it while I'm doing the captures because it's so slow. I have to be it's very touchy the way that it's moving everything. So what you can do now is you can see if you've got a decent curve over the teeth, and it looks somewhat natural. Now, if you notice, I'm also getting a lot of crushing in my weighting for the jaw. We may actually have to go back and re-weight the corners of the mouth a little bit more, or we could actually try and fix it in the corrective shapes right here and decide that we're going to leave the weighting alone and actually try and use this corrective shape to correct the corners of the mouth for each side that it pulls on. And I wouldn't suggest using this as your first sort of line of defense against a badly skinned model. Your best bet is to play with your skinning as much as possible to make sure that you get it working. I've always said that it's one of those situations where if you start with bad work, everything else becomes more and more difficult to achieve. So try and avoid correcting things. Trying to come up with corrections for everything as opposed to actually doing the work right in the first place. I'm going to see if I can get this to work a little bit better with just a little bit of corrections in it. I'm going to leave this. I think it really needs to be weighted a bit better. So now that we've got the one side done and it seems to be working, what I'm going to do is I want to make a copy of this, and it's going very slow because of the capture, and I'm going to call this correct right, And now we need to mirror this over, and we need to flip it from side to side. And we can use the same mirror morph, but now what we can do is we can just use it as the standard. So you can either change this to false, or you can just run a mirror morph with the open and close parentheses after it on this model, and give it a second, and it'll mirror it from one side to the other, and you can see that it's swapped it over. So now it's a matter of going in and adding this to the other side, and we can use this to correct the shape when the jaw rolls to the other side. So if the jaw now swings to the other side, this corrective shape will be turned down, and this corrective shape will be turned up, and it'll fix the jaw for the other side, and it'll work as we expect it to. Again, we may need to go in and do some more tweaking around the mouth area for the weights, I think. Try and get that working a little more smoothly. And then we may need to go in and actually readjust some of these targets. This is, again, part of the problem of doing setups like this, is that it takes time to go back and forth and get things to work in conjunction with each other. The next thing we have to discover is when the mouth is open and the jaw is swung to the side, do these targets cause more problems as they get blended together, because this target will be blended into one of these two targets at that point, and we could end up with more problems. It could start looking a little strange. We'd have to go back and fix it. So in the next chapter, what we're going to do is we're going to deal with that. We're going to set up a UI item. So we've got the control, and we can move the control around like in my initial demonstration of what we're going to be achieving here. And we can then test the whole range of motion out of the ogre and see if we're getting the jaw rotation control out of it that we need without crunching in the corners and overlapping of polygons and just general ugliness happening.